So what does it take to make your first million, to scale a business, or to get your first high street listing? I'm Oliver Bruce, founder and entrepreneur myself, and I ask industry leaders and entrepreneurs on my award-winning podcast, Success is in the Mind, exactly that. From high-growth startups to scale-ups and businesses about to exit, I am joined weekly by the founders of businesses like Octopus Energy, Genies, Thursday Dating, Habito, Cano Water and Hera, as well as many more. From sportswear to tech, energy to consumables, hear it here firsthand from those entrepreneurs innovating and disrupting. Join me every Wednesday from 8 a.m.
We needed a mortgage broker because we didn't know anything about mortgage broking. So I hired a mortgage broker who I found on LinkedIn, and his bio was 21st century mortgage broker. And I was like, well, that's the guy.
Perfect.
so
What does success look like to Daniel?
I think I want to run the mortgage industry.
I thought you were going to say run the country then. I wasn't sure where it was going.
Oh, God, no.
Thank you so much to our headline sponsors for the year, Capsule Cover. Capsule Cover, a specialist insurance partner to growth businesses, supports some of the UK's most innovative and ambitious companies. Sponsoring each and every one of our podcasts, we're on a journey with Capsule, and so should you be. If you're a scale-up or an ambitious high-growth business, check out how Capsule Cover can help you with bespoke insurance solutions. Inquire via capsulecover.com and quote Success22. On today's episode of Success is in the Mind, we've school dropout turned entrepreneur Daniel Hegarty, founder of online mortgage broker Habito, who are looking to disrupt the mortgage market by streamlining the process. Having dropped out of school age 16 to follow his passion and work in music, it wasn't long until Daniel was signed to the same label as Boy George. Earning £100 a week, Daniel would tour the UK with his punk band Serum. Ending up in LA writing songs for Robbie Williams, Sugababes and Pink, Daniel's music career was starting to take off. That was until he decided to leave it all behind. As an original team member of the payday lender Wonga, Daniel spent nearly 10 years in the world of startup before spotting a gap in the market for the business he now runs, which has raised over 80 million quid in funding. I asked Daniel if dropping out of school might have been the best decision he ever made. How do you set up a business with no experience and generate tens of millions of pounds in funding? And what does the future of mortgage broking look like? Ladies and gentlemen, founder and CEO of Habito, Daniel Hegarty. So Daniel, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I mean, looking back at your childhood, you left school at 16, which was an interesting decision. I bet your parents didn't necessarily think that was the best thing to do back then. You said, and I quote, "I guess I was just a bit of a rebel." When researching this, it said online that you went to go and work in a guitar shop, but that wasn't strictly true, was it?
I actually left school because I was in a band. I was in a sort of a tiny, sort of quite terrible little punk band, and we got a tiny record deal. And so there was the opportunity to tour the bright lights of Tunbridge Wells and Leeds. And so the idea of continuing on in education seemed insane. Also, I was an abominable student, like a really, really terrible. I remember one of my early school reports said that I had a lack of scholastic integrity. I still don't quite.
What is scholastic integrity?
I think essentially that I could wing it, but I actually didn't really know anything. Which may be a pattern that has reappeared in later life. But no, I didn't get on well at school. I didn't enjoy it very much. I was a bit of a nocturnal creature, so I just found all the getting up pretty awful. And once, there was the opportunity to not do it and do something, I guess, a bit more creative, a bit more practical and immediate, like being a band, that seemed like a better idea.
Because the band did make you a bit of money. You were making 100 quid a week. You had signed to the same label as Boy George. I mean, that is big bucks for a 16-year-old back then. What did you do with all that cash?
Well, I probably shouldn't say. It wasn't nutritional. No, it was. No, I felt like a millionaire. I also felt like a genius. Like all my friends were still plugging away at sixth form, and I was on the road with 100 quid in my pocket. So no, it was really exciting. But and the thing that was kind of cool about it was that I was suddenly immersed in a world of adults as a child. So I don't know, like a lot of the friends I made and the experiences I had then, I felt like was sort of formative for me and sort of allowed me to maybe jump a few levels, if you like, in terms of my comprehension of how the world worked. So I really loved it, but it was also intimidating, and we were also like imbeciles and made a total hash of it and weren't very good musically either. So it was it could have gone a number of ways, and I'm fortunate it worked out all right.
I mean, what did your parents say when you literally said, "Mum, Dad, I'm quitting school"?
They weren't thrilled. So I was actually at that point living with my grandparents, and I think they were sort of worried. I think they were concerned, but also like pretty cognizant of the fact that like I wasn't a brilliant listener. Like I was quite a sort of quiet kid, but I was very willful. Like I was going to do what I was going to do, and I think they sort of recognised there wasn't much value in trying to push me off that road. And I guess maybe that hasn't changed that much.
Did you have any I suppose neurological disadvantages or diversity in that sense, dyslexia, dyspraxia, or were you just generally not interested at all in establishment?
So nothing diagnosed. I really just, to be blunt, I just couldn't get my shit together. Like at the most basic level, I couldn't get the stuff in the bag. I couldn't like have the right textbook for the right lesson. I had very bad insomnia. So I would always be up till 4 a.m. reading sci-fi like a loser, and then just trying to like get to school and be prepared for it. And I would often fall asleep in class. And I remember my best friend, actually, it was my birthday last week, and he did a little speech, and he said that they would laugh. I'd be snoring away on my desk, and the teacher would just be like, "Just leave him. Just leave him. It's easier this way."
He can add nothing to this conversation.
Exactly.
Just let them lie. But you did do quite well. I mean, irrespective of the £100 and the Boy George label, you ended up in LA writing songs for the big time bands of the time, like S Club 7, Sugababes, Robbie Williams. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? I mean,
just again to be clear, I was very much on the margins of all these successful artists' careers. But no, I did. For a good, really like 8 or 9 years, actually. Like I carved out a career as a working musician, sometimes touring, sometimes in my own bands that were all spectacularly unsuccessful, sometimes writing for other artists. And I did. I loved it. And I'm not sure there's more fun you can be having when you're 21 than living in LA, running around doing silly stuff. But it is... I mean, it's a tough career in many ways, right? Like you're very much paycheck to paycheck. I would look at some of my sort of older compatriots, particularly those with kids, and we'd be off on tour for 9 months, and you'd see them saying goodbye to the kids at the airport, and you're like, oof, like that's tough. And so no, although I really, really loved it, I think there was a point where I was like this, like I don't know if I want to be. Essentially, the only way that I could find to be financially secure was to kind of get involved in music that I didn't really like. And I was like, do you know what I mean? Would I rather like be playing terrible pop music or would I rather just get a job where I actually could be a bit more sort of creatively engaged?
Because your band at the time was called Serum when you were younger, but you essentially started writing for, as I said, the likes of Sugababes and people like that who are pop. You were punk. Was it kind of through gritted teeth that you wrote these lyrics and gave it to them on a piece of paper?
I was so broke, man. Like I was so thrilled to get a paycheck from anybody at that point. And I grew up in a very sort of ordinary sort of I guess middle class environment. But like there was no sort of comfortable safety net, and there was a real consciousness that I could just see those credit card bills racking up, and it's just like it's difficult to earn a living. And I was in all these terrible. No, they weren't terrible. I was in these good bands, but they were very quite challenging listening. 9-minute instrumental epics, which surprisingly didn't ever bother the radio stations playlists.
Quite a niche, I suppose, in that sense. And what did your parents do then? As a kind of how did they make their money? How did you have a comfortable upbringing? What's their line of business?
So my dad was an accountant. Worked in hotels, and my mum didn't work principally. So I guess again, to be honest, it was always a house that was right on the edge financially. Like I remember money just being like one of the sort of that sort of tension around money and what we had and what we didn't have being kind of a constant narrative. And actually, I also lived with my grandparents. We lived together, and they were, they'd come over from Austria and Czechoslovakia in the Second World War, as they were Jewish, and so there was a little bit of a sort of refugee mentality in my house where there was a kind of like things can be taken away from us. We're not like, there's no sort of surplus. We only have what we have. And I think that did really stay with me. And I think that's one of the things I actually found challenging as a musician, and even as, in the early stages of Habito, was this kind of always having to have my hand out, always like asking for something from someone. Whereas I think when you grow up in that kind of environment, what you really want is financial security and certainty over your, control of your own life. Really. And
that's kind of ironic, really, isn't it, Daniel, in terms of where you went from and to and before, obviously, Habito, which you run now, because you were, an early team member in Wonga, which was the payday lender. That was something that you did. You built the website, you kind of did the UX there, but you were very early stages when joining that business.
I was. I mean, it was bizarre. I still can't believe they gave me a job. I literally rolled out of, like 10 years of being a musician. I just moved back to the UK. I just split up with my girlfriend. I was very sad. I had no idea what was next.
Can you write a song about that, like James Blunt, something upsetting?
It's a great album, never got made, sadly, due to all that payday lending.
Damn.
But no, I had a really close friend who was a corporate lawyer during the day and an opera singer at night. So I knew her from music. And I was like, listen, I've got no qualifications and no discernible skills, but do you know anyone who might give me a job? And she introduced me to the founder of Wonga, a guy called Errol Damlin. And I was, I don't really know what the business was, who he was, but was kind of just thrilled to not have to go back on the road for a few months and see if I could find my feet. And I did. I completely fell in love with it. Like, it turned out that I was a tremendous geek. And when they let me loose on like the credit model and the website and everything else, I just, I couldn't have been more excited. I was suddenly just surrounded by, like, I'd always been surrounded by impressive people, but just a completely different universe, of like incredibly focused, driven kind of humans. I absolutely loved it.
In terms of how you learned how to build a website or work on a website, or even with the credit aspect that you alluded to, where did you pick that experience up? Because you didn't have any.
Again, like massive geek. I was living a lie, trying to pretend I was a cool musician.
Catch me if you can, right? Is that what it was?
No, but the thing he gave me after 6 weeks, the CEO, I asked him if I could buy some books on Amazon, and he said he gave me the corporate credit card, and he said, like, you can buy as many books as you like. And I just, again, like, this was completely foreign to me, the idea of that kind of plenty. And so I bought my books on logistic regression and UX design and web analytics, and I was like a sponge. I couldn't believe that someone was just letting me loose out there on the in the real world doing real things.
Still with insomnia, reading them until 4 a.m, I assume.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you were there for quite a while, and then you jumped ship and became MD of another business, which you really only lasted in for a year before obviously going into where you are now. But being surrounded by all these highly successful and inspirational people, from maybe not the Sugababes, but maybe the pop stars that you were surrounded by, through to CEOs of essentially a very big business, which was Wonga. Did that drive you to sort of do something different and to make a difference in the world? Yeah,
it sounds basic, but I guess I got to watch Wonga, and listen, Wonga is such a complex story, and like lots wrong with Wonga. But what it was one thing it definitely was successful for a number of years, and I guess I just got to see it like the very closest level. How you can build something huge in the world from absolutely nothing. And I guess I got to see the step by step and what it took in terms of commitment and drive, intellectual capacity, whatever else you might think of. And so, I think kind of coming through that whole experience so the second half, it was really quite unpleasant, and we lost our way on a number of fronts, but it really left me with a drive that I wanted to build something of my own, something where I could control the culture. I could make sure that we were sort of really unambiguously aligned with our customers. You kind of get this like crazy thought in your head that like you might be able to, in your little minute way, change the world a little bit.
And in terms of where you think it went so badly wrong for Wonga, where do you think they went off the rails?
It was an unbelievably successful company. So we went from 4 or 5 of us to 1,000 of us in 4 years. And it was a business that just could not really come to terms with its own scale. So it was, suddenly you're in 9 countries with 3 product lines, and it just, and then when that sort of meteoric growth comes with its own momentum and expectations from the outside world. And I think somewhere along the line we lost sight of the customer. Maybe we lost sight a little bit of like the part that we were playing in the world more broadly. And I think became a little bit, we were under siege from quite early on because, we were seen as usurious and so on. And I think we let that siege mentality kind of sort of deaden us a little bit. I think we felt like we were at war. We ended up making a bunch of, I think, decisions that weren't great, that resulted in a bunch of outcomes for customers that weren't great. I learned an extraordinary amount going through it.
You left obviously 4 years before it went belly up, but you joined a company called Everline. Now, what did Everline do? Because you were the MD for them.
So Everline actually was part of Wonga.
Was it really?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we moved into small business lending and also actually into a number of international businesses. So so my last couple of years there, I was running everything that wasn't the core UK business. So I was working on that international stuff, which was partially because I wanted to be somewhere I felt a little more comfortable. So that was really good. But again, like it was just it was a behemoth. It was really big. It was really disorganized. And again, I couldn't really ultimately influence the culture. And I think that of all things, when it sort of came to what to do next, was what was really driving me to found my own business.
Because you founded the business, not long after you became MD within that, I suppose, affiliation of Wonga. Now, in terms of founding that business, you found a niche, a really good niche in the market that actually nobody else at the time had seen. And there are other people out there now, but maybe not people that have done it quite as well as you have, because you've raised millions of pounds to get this off the ground. How did you do that?
So the honest truth is, I think when you're in this sort of, I was open to it. So I was out there, I knew I wanted to found my own business. I knew I wanted to build something. And I guess you're looking around, you're hoping to trip over some like sort of, tear in the fabric of everyday life. And for me, that was buying my own home. So I'd finally saved it up, and this must be about 7 years ago, and was just trying to buy my first house. And I just had this completely catastrophic experience, like sort of hilariously so, where I won't drag you through the whole thing, but essentially the application went into the mortgage broker, sent it off to the lender, and they included me, my partner at the time, and my partner again. So it was declined on the grounds that I was like a bigamist or a polygamist or something.
What, really? So I thought you had two partners, like a Mormon.
Exactly. But then the mortgage broker, realizing their mistake, sort of after it got declined, then resubmitted it, but this time accidentally took me off the application. So just put my partner and my partner.
Right.
So that got declined. So anyway, this whole thing went on for like a month. We nearly lost the house. The sellers completely lost faith in our ability to buy the home. And it was interesting. It was I realized I absolutely had no comprehension of the home buying process or mortgages or anything around it. But the thing that really struck me was how totally disempowered I felt and how like emotional the experience was. And I think that was where it sort of clicked in my head. I was like, there is absolutely no way that it needs to be this difficult. Like there must be a way, whether it's through putting the customer back at the center, whether it's through leveraging technology in a smart way. I didn't know at that point, but I had a real fire in my belly to figure it out.
Because did you always want to go into business? I mean, when you go into music, it's kind of like running your own freelance business, I suppose. But you went into quite a big business, raising, as I said, tens of millions of quid to get it off the ground. It's a bit of a change from giving away money to having to raise it for yourself.
I've got to say, and it sounds like horribly pretentious, but I'm not that infatuated by commerce. I've got to be totally honest. It's not like the sort of seeing the revenue number go up and to the right isn't the thing that gets me out of bed. I think and it's not because I'm a philanthropist or anything like that, just the thing that gets me really excited is like solving real tangible problems that I can get in my head around and I can see their impact in the world. And I think the thing I didn't know when I found it, but I really discovered as I went along, was that the more people that I was doing that with, the more the satisfaction I got from it multiplied. So as the team got bigger and I was surrounded by, again, more and more extraordinary people, I got more and more from it, and it made me want to go and raise more capital and make it larger and see quite how much impact we could potentially have in the world. In terms of
scaling it then from day one through to, let's just say, the first year or so, what did that look like in terms of bootstrapping, putting in series, I suppose, pre-seed and then Series A, etc.? Did you have to pump your own cash in, or did you go straight out to the market and ask for some money?
No, I wouldn't ask for some money.
Why use your own when you can use somebody else's?
Well, I guess my investment was not taking a salary for a year, I guess. I went out and raised I forget what it was now, $200,000, I think, from two people I'd worked with previously who'd kind of said, listen, we back you. If you're going to go and build something, we'd love to be the first money. So I was very fortunate in that. And then, it was several months of me sort of sitting around in my flat in my pants, thinking really hard and worrying that I hadn't done anything yet.
You could be doing that right now, Daniel. We would have no idea based on the visual.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Good job there's not a mirror behind you.
Exactly. But no, and then sort of as it went along, I managed to sort of attract the first engineer. And then actually we needed a mortgage broker because we didn't know anything about mortgage broking. So I hired a mortgage broker who I found on LinkedIn, and his bio was 21st century mortgage broker. And I was like, well, that's the guy. So we took him. And essentially, the three of us sat in my kitchen.
In your pants?
Yeah, well, no, we were at this point, we were all betrousered.
Donning the trowel, yeah.
Exactly. And we spent 6 months, I guess, sort of kind of figuring each other out, because we're sort of very, particularly like the mortgage broker and the engineer, are like completely alien to each other and their worldviews, and sort of trying to fathom how the market functioned, what the sort of the lived experience of the customer was, and what a better version of it might look like. And it was, I've got to be frank, I really enjoyed that part, but I found that first year really tough. And I think I really felt like a charlatan. It sounds silly, but you're running around and you're telling everyone, like, I'm the CEO, I'm the made-up CEO of this made-up business, and we're going to disrupt the mortgage industry. We're worth billions, and you need to give me millions. And it made me feel pretty uncomfortable, like, because it was clearly fanciful, and thought, obviously in hindsight it worked out okay, but that trying to like force something new into existence, it's actually really quite uncomfortable. And so when I look back, and I sort of, everybody idealizes standing at the whiteboard and sketching out the first product map, but I think the truth is that I was under quite a lot of pressure. I was quite anxious about the fact I didn't have any income, and it was kind of unpleasant.
I can imagine. Now, in terms of when you kind of came up with the idea and then you hired the 21st century mortgage broker from LinkedIn, which I think is brilliant. Did you have an MVP at the time? Did you have anything to get the cash off your mates, or was it just your head, your idea, and your personality?
No, I think it was mostly just, I think they'd seen me work before, and I think one of them, the comment was like, the good thing about Dan is, he'll run through a wall to get it done. And I think that was their feeling, was like, by the time I'd stuck my name on it, like I'd be too proud to let it fail, whatever it might be. And so, yeah, and that's really fortunate. And I think now I do a tiny bit of angel investing. Like, I see quite how advantaged I was in being able to kind of skip that first credibility building step. But no, and we spent that first year, we built that MVP, and that MVP effectively allowed us to go and raise our first sort of institutional seed round. And because it's a regulated business, there's quite a few hoops you've got to jump through in that first year. You can't just put out your MVP. And then so it was probably about 16 months from me getting started through to us actually operationally launching the business.
And then you obviously went through more funds after that. Now, in terms of what those tranches and what those funds actually look like, how did you know what the right point in the history of the business was to go and raise a couple of £1 million extra, or whatever that might have been?
So, to be honest, all of our rounds until the more recent ones were opportunistic. So we were approached or had a relationship through one of the early investors, or maybe someone in my network, who was like, listen, I can see you've still got some runway left, but I imagine you'll be out in 6 months. Would you like the money now? And because I am fundamentally lazy, and the idea, and actually to the earlier point, and because I don't really like wandering around with my hand out trying to convince people to give me cash, the terms are always very reasonable, and so I was always happy to take the capital from people who were leaning in and ready to partner with us.
Based on what they did to you in terms of those angels back in the day with Habito, do you very much do the same with people you're investing in, or is that something that you're looking for them to come and ask you for the cash?
I'm still quite early on there, and the thing that I've really realized is that I love doing that pre-seed round. Like, I like being the first money in when it's just a guy or a girl or a couple of guys and girls, and essentially getting to relive the glory days of being at the whiteboard with them. And I'm not really adding any value, but just in sort of by giving them a mirror to look in, and sort of allowing them to have, sort of experience the different context for their thoughts. I get a huge amount from it. I get an incredible amount of intellectual stimulation, and I hope that it is of some use to them. So I'm always on the lookout, like, for these, for people who sort of haven't been sucked into the vortex of, the angel networks and the VCs, and are kind of still like in that raw form. I think that's where I can add the most value.
In terms, I suppose, of how the business then scaled over time, because you guys wrote a lot of mortgages in quite a short space of time, from 245 mortgages in 2016, £361 million worth in 2017, £1 billion in 2018, £2 billion in 2019, £4 billion in 2020, give or take. Huge numbers. How were you guys making money off that? Were you just creaming off the top? What was the kind of process in terms of monetization?
So it's really simple. So all mortgage brokers get paid about 1/3% of the value of a mortgage every time that they broke it. So essentially, it's very, very simple for us. We then went on to add a bunch of other products. We have a thing called Habito Plus, where we help with the whole home buying process, as well as now being a mortgage lender in our own right. So we have slightly different revenue models there. But the core was very simple. Like customers find the process of getting a mortgage utterly hellish, which I understand. And so we wanted to make it easier, give them great quality advice, and sort of take away as much of that pain and friction as we possibly could. And so really, once we'd, I guess, cracked the fundamental user experience, we just then had to deal with all of the usual problems of scale. And of course, as soon as anything's working at one set level of scale, it's on fire at the next. And so, you spend a few years sort of turning around in circles, trying to put those fires out sequentially. And before you know it, it's 5 years later and you're writing 1% of all the mortgages in the UK.
So in terms of the way you've diversified now into the world of actually becoming a company that gives mortgages to individuals, that must take a huge amount of capital. Is that because you guys have now got enough liquid in the bank, or you've got access to overdrafts and loans from banks to be able to do that?
No, so you have to go out and raise specific debt capital for mortgage lending. So we've now raised about £1.5 billion in debt specifically for that. And that is tricky because that's a lot of cash to be entrusted with, to be frank. And especially when you're a 4 or 5 year old business who's never lent before. And so this is a sort of, so you need to find some very credible people, much more credible than me, to get everybody comfortable. And you need to build a real platform. And it's actually deeply unnatural in a startup where you want to fast iterate and, build on the fly. Whereas if you want that £1 billion, like the whole thing needs to be built and you need to be able to demonstrate that it's robust and that the numbers all add up before you can write your first mortgage. So it actually was quite a mountain for us to climb, but we really felt like as a broker, we could only solve half the problem. Like we were, if you were being unkind or unlucky, you would, the customer ends up accelerated to the same traffic jam at the bank, and so we really wanted to take responsibility for the entire process and see if we could, in a more fundamental way, transform the experience of buying a home.
You guys have basically automated it as well, haven't you? So you don't actually need to have that many people, I suppose, writing or brokering these deals, because it's all very much done through software and AI.
Well, it's interesting. So what we found, so as technologists, obviously, we can be a bit fundamentalist about these things. We were like, we're going to automate it away. Humans are bad. And it turned out, in some ways we were right, in other ways we were completely wrong. So there is a lot of ridiculous manual work that humans end up doing in the mortgage process that is much better suited for machines. So all the arithmetic, all the figuring out which lender, has the right attributes and all that, much better done algorithmically. But actually, this is an emotional purchase. And most people don't feel comfortable taking a £200,000 loan, a loan on the internet. We found that. So actually what sort of emerged was that where we could really put our people to work in the best way was by building those empathetic connections and being there at sort of the points of maximum emotional magnitude to provide comfort and support, and then let the machine do all the boring stuff in the background. So people are an important part of it, but clearly compared to a traditional lender, there are far fewer people involved in the process of making a mortgage. So
just talk me through the process then. I go to the website, I want a mortgage for £250,000. How do I do that? How do I get the mortgage?
So firstly, you tell us some things. So the basics about who you are, and then we give you a general sense of what you might be able to afford. Ordinarily then people sort of disappear for a little bit onto Rightmove or Zoopla and go and find that house. And once they have, they come back and tell us about the house. And then if you like, the application is kind of complete. We then, all the way through, you'll have your own assigned mortgage expert who'll be sort of holding your hand and walking you through all the different steps. And then as soon as you're ready to go, we find the cheapest mortgage in the market that's appropriate for you, and in some cases one of our own mortgages. We send you off. We send your application off. It comes back processed, and off you go. And it normally, on average, it takes about half as long with us as it would with a traditional broker from our research.
And it's a damn sight cheaper for the individual as well, right?
Yeah, it's free, which is really great.
There you go.
So we're not the only free broker, I should say, but the majority of the traditional brokers will. But they both get that revenue from the bank, but will also charge you on average £500 on top of that, which is a bit steep.
In terms of how it looks, do you guys do it commercially as well? In terms of, would you do it for commercial property as well as buy to let, or is it simply people's houses?
No, so we are very much a consumer business. Although we do buy-to-let and sort of we deal across the whole spectrum, we find like absolutely our sort of core customer base is as you say, that sort of £250,000 mortgage, trying to figure out like, you know, the best way to get to home ownership.
So, I mean, in terms of the way you guys have scaled, it's been huge. You've taken on massive debt, as you say, in terms of £1.5 billion worth to underwrite these mortgages. Now, in terms of how you scaled with individual staff and hiring the right people, obviously you'd gone from singing to writing music to working in a company which did scale to 1,000 people, and you saw that happen. How did you put the right people in the right place at the right time to get to the point that you needed to with Habito?
It's probably the hardest puzzle to solve, to be honest, because and often can be quite painful, because the people you need at the beginning are not necessarily the people you need at the middle, and not necessarily the people you need at the end. And that applies to me as well. You know, like you have to really transform your sort of capabilities and proclivities as you go along. But no, I very much believe in hiring for aptitude rather than experience. So you just try and find, you know, intimidatingly brilliant people who you're excited about spending every day with. And that's kind of even now how I approach it. And particularly in that early days, I think that's vital. Like whether they've spent 10 years here or 5 years there, or what their CV looks like is almost irrelevant. It's whether they like have a fire in their belly and the kind of the intellectual capacity to really do the work. But then as you go along, and I guess as some of the things that you're doing become less experimental, less uncertain, and now need to become repeatable and scalable, that's when I really found the benefit of experience, and bring in like people with sort of direct experience of, you know, running operations or building an engineering team to kind of allow you to take it to that next level and sort of step back from your sort of emotional attachment to the things that you had before and the processes you had before and the things maybe that you'd built. And so now the team it's really quite diverse. So we still have, you know, people with us from the day one, but then we have, you know, some heavyweights coming in who, you know, been global head of mortgages at HSBC or something like that. And actually having them all together is the most fun thing. Like sometimes watching them sort of look askance at each other and try and figure out what the other one is talking about. But again, I think that's why culture is the most fundamentally important thing, because everybody's coming from radically different work experiences and backgrounds. So if you don't have that kind of sort of fundamental common purpose and empathy with each other and desire to build, like, it's not going to work.
And do you hire, I mean, obviously back in the day you used to specifically do the hiring yourself, I suppose, but now you've obviously got a team around you that do that. Now, what's the criteria that you hire on, apart from necessarily aptitude? But is it grades? Do you look at grades? Because ironically, you'll have pretty crap ones, frankly.
None. No, we don't. So we actually don't, we don't take CVs. And all of our hiring processes are completely blind. So you basically, it's a bit annoying, to be frank, if you're a candidate, because you effectively have to fill out these kind of work samples and sort of explain how you would approach things. But we felt like it was the only way that we could manage all of the unconscious bias that sort of is unavoidable in these fast, in all businesses. So that's how we approach it. So no, we are completely disinterested in what you did and where you've been, and certainly what grades you got 10 or 20 years ago. And then it's only once we've kind of got through that phase that we'll actually meet candidates. And really then I think it comes down to that same thing. It's like, are you excited about seeing each other every day? And do we believe that you've got the skills to solve the problem in front of you? What
I'm really interested in by yourself is that evidently you are an entrepreneur, quite by definition, but arguably you seem to have overcome quite a lot of mental hurdles, I suppose, because obviously you haven't had any money, for instance, when you were touring, but you didn't really care. You had a good time, but you got on with it. And again, you've taken out £1.5 billion worth of debt. Don't really care. Just kind of get on with it. And again, when you started, you didn't take a salary for a year or so. How do you, because so many people, A, couldn't do that, both because they haven't got the cash, but B, they just couldn't mentally stomach it. People can't get past that barrier of not taking an income.
It's, do you know what? Just being totally transparent with you, I didn't find it that hard at the time. Like I just never thought of myself as an anxious person, and I kind of just gutted it out, and I didn't really think that much about it. And that was always one of the narratives about me was like, oh yeah, Daniel, run through a wall. He's super hardcore, that guy. And actually, it's only been, I think as I've got a bit older, I was 40 last week. I've got 3 kids under 5, and I think
not bad luck.
You're telling me. But I grew up a lot. And actually, I think what I realized was that I actually was terribly anxious for a lot of the time back then. And even though I wasn't, necessarily sort of mentally processing it in a healthy way, like I was just gritting my teeth and going on. And actually, it's been that's been quite a revelation for me, and particularly now as I look at all the people I work with, making sure that making sure that I am open and vulnerable about the fact that I find it hard and I get anxious and I get exhausted. What we do is incredibly difficult. I think has allowed a sort of a new level of kind of intimacy for us as a business, and I'm thrilled that I managed to find my way there. And I'm not sure I would have if I hadn't sort of had kids and grown up a bit.
Because in terms of when the pandemic happened, it affected a lot of individuals, a lot of businesses. It affected you guys. Revenues went down 70%. I mean, as if you hadn't kind of had it, I suppose, hard to start with by risking it all, you nearly lost it again.
It was really awful. It was really awful because it was the multiplication of those two things was like, one, commercially we were horrified at what we were seeing in our numbers. And on the other side, we were just, like suddenly, I'm looking at all these people I used to see every day, and now they're like just in little squares on Zoom. And you can see people were, we forget a bit now, but at the time people were terribly afraid.
100%.
Like afraid for their families, afraid for their livelihoods. We just didn't know what the future would hold. And I think it was a really big moment for us. And I think as we, and we had to do some furloughing. And I think just being really, really direct about sort of our individual emotional states, and kind of having this sort of shared trauma in a way that I know we all had as a society, but within the community of Habito, obviously we had in our own way. It really changed things. Like I think we went from being like maybe a slightly, overconfident classical startup who's just doubling and doubling and doubling, to sort of having a notion of our own mortality, and that like this was a precious thing that we were doing together, and we shouldn't waste it, and we shouldn't take it for granted.
And what decisions then, Dan, did you make during the pandemic when you could see revenues diving massively? How did you, pivot? How did you change? How did you kind of just batten the hatches? Did you have to get rid of people?
Yeah, no, we went through, so we had to furlough some people because obviously we didn't have any customers coming in. So we had we couldn't keep paying the operational staff in that way. And then we also had to kill some product lines. So there was some new stuff that we were really excited about and we've been working on for a while. We just didn't have the capacity to keep focused on it. So what we really did was we sort of stopped. We tried to remove the sort of external factors, worry less about what was happening in the market, and really, really focus on what we could do in these sort of lulls in volume to improve the product, or get further ahead on our home buying products or our lending products. So actually we ended up, we'd been running at such breakneck speed for years that we did get this moment of kind of an extraordinary moment of reflection, actually, on like perhaps that we were trying to do too many things at once, and perhaps our sort of quality bar had started to drop. So we really focused on putting it back and making sure that we were like had our house in order, so that when the market returned, which it did, just a year later, we were ready for it. And that I think again, it was very painful, but in retrospect, I think was extraordinarily helpful for the business.
In terms, I suppose, because there will be people listening to this that are at that very early stage, right? Either working for someone and wanting to jump ship, or wanting to start their own business. What would you say to them in terms of the first, month to 6 months they need to have in place to be able to go and raise some capital, but from someone like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, so it varies, depending on verticals. Obviously, in fintech, because it's so heavily regulated, it's very hard to have much to show apart from an idea. Look, I think the key thing is to have a really, really clear narrative about the problem that you're trying to solve. And one of the things that unsettles me is when people are trying to solve 50 things simultaneously, or they're pitching me 2 ideas at once like that. Those things are like a complete red flag to me. I always want to see like real focus, and I really want to have the sense that they're going to be doing it whether I'm involved or not. But I do think it can take different forms. Sometimes, like if you're a skilled orator, like just explaining your passion for it is enough. Decks are normally the enemy in my experience, but sometimes they're a decent way to allow someone to sort of organize their thoughts and explain them to you. So sometimes they can work. Nowadays I see a lot more long form notions. People just writing a little book on the plan. And again, so yeah, I think it is. to be honest, I think the medium is completely irrelevant. I think it just it's the clarity of thought and determination that you need to express.
And in terms of the scalability of irrespective if you're investing in it or if you're starting a business full stop, because obviously you have to focus on the scalability, you have to focus on giving back to the team because they're not going to do it for free, I suppose. And you alluded earlier to the fact that you've got shares or team members in the business with shares. Now, are those shares that are gifted to staff members? Are they bought? How does that work structurally?
So no, they are. So everybody at Habito is a shareholder. So we are. I won't bore you with all the detail, but because financial services can be a little bit tricky. You don't always get all of the same sort of tax benefits around stock options. So we run an EMI program. But yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. I think it's fundamentally important that everybody has some level of ownership in the business. I think it just changes the way we see each other and sort of, prevents that kind of like, he's going to become a gazillionaire and I'm just going to be still like slaving away in the back office. And I think that, like nobody wants that. So I think they can be just this incredible tool for providing evidence of the fact that we really are a community and that we really are trying to do this for each other. They are complex and they can be, people can't, it's a really funny balance and something that I struggle with sometimes, which is they also are very likely to be worth nothing. Particularly in the early stages of business. And so I would feel quite uncomfortable, being like, you're going to be a millionaire, like take a 50% pay cut. And so you have to strike this balance of being like, look, this is real potential for wealth creation. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make it happen with like, don't spend a penny of it. If you can't afford this to live on this salary, don't take this job. Like these are kind of long odds lottery tickets at heart. And I think finding your way, your comfort and making sure that you don't mislead people as to the certainty of the value of it, whilst not sort of denigrating them so much that they seem worthless to the employee. There's a bit of a challenge there.
It is, and in terms of the early days, then I suppose you obviously gave shares to the, I suppose, founding members of Habito. Now, in terms of what that looked like salary-wise, could you remember what you put them on financially, say the first 5-10 employees?
It was really variable, actually, and it still is. Some people come in at market because we can afford it. Other people are coming out of, Goldman Sachs, and they're taking 75% pay cuts, and are looking to make it up with equity. So no, it was a real mix. I generally look. I think in those very early days, you're so desperately trying to keep your costs under control because obviously that cash that you've got is your oxygen, right? Like if you run out, it's over. And so certainly, there were people who had taken £30,000 or £40,000 pay cuts to join the company. But also if people are sweating how they're going to pay their mortgage, again, no pun intended, but if people are so kind of worried about their financial lives, it makes it very hard for them to focus on solving the problem at hand. So I think even as an employer, you also have to be responsible in like you can really attract them in with the promise of the shares and the excitement of startup life. But I think there's an onus on you as the employer to make sure they can actually afford to do this job.
Yeah, there's a reality really in terms of not being able to cash them in just yet. But in terms of cashing in shares, so to speak, Dan, I mean, you've de-risked your life quite significantly over the last couple of years. You're now an angel investor. You started with nothing. You've now got something. The day that you, I suppose, sold some of your chips off or, cashed them in, what did that feel like? Because you then have liquid to buy a drum kit, as we can see in the video.
That was my 40th birthday present.
That's pretty cool. I love it.
It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, I do like that. I used to drum.
It's a bit of a midlife crisis.
Yeah. Is it electric or is it proper?
It's electric. Yeah. My wife said I wasn't allowed a real drum kit.
No, she's probably right then, isn't she? She's probably right.
How did it feel? It felt great. I'll be completely honest. Like it felt amazing, and at many, many points along the road, it felt incredibly improbable. Liquidity is like a very scarce resource in this game, and I think being able to, I think having some kind of tangible marker that all of the effort you'd put in was worth, had added up to something that was really meaningful. I would say though, I do think it can get a little bit detached from reality, and the sort of the absurdity of valuations and everything, like the kind of the, not to be vulgar, but the sort of the pissing contest of my company's worth $1 billion, mine's worth $3.5 billion. Like it's like I think you have to be incredibly cautious about not letting that invade your consciousness because it's not reality and you don't need the money. And this is the thing that I've said for a long time and easy for me to say is that like my financial situation has so infinitely outstripped my expectations of even 5 or 10 years ago. And not to say that I'm a billionaire or anything, but that I think you just have to remember to be satisfied at some point, and not just keep expanding your lifestyle and your ambitions and your need to keep up with everybody else and what they have, and just remember what you would have been blown away by when you were 18.
Well, that's it. I mean, do you have that element of affirmation where you do just step back and go, do you know, I've got enough now to carry on for the rest of my life and have a nice family life and whatever else, whatever's important to you individually, and not worry about going into work the next day and trying to drive it forwards? Or are you still as driven by work because it's a bigger thing? It's not financial anymore. It's more making people's lives fundamentally better.
Yeah, and again, it's not because of any moral substance on my part. And you can tell from the fact I left school and became a musician, it's just never been that interesting to me beyond the freedom that it provides. Now it definitely changed a bit when I had kids, and I was like, oh shit, my financial missteps now have implications for others. And I definitely became a little bit more okay, I need to but, and again, now I'm terrified that my kids are going to turn out to be tremendous assholes because, they live in a nice house in Hackney. But then my wife is like, well, what do you want to do? We're going to create some dangerous mind scenario so they can grow up gritty. And I'm like, oh no, I guess we're not going to do that. So
just make them camp in the garden every couple of days and don't feed them. But no, in terms of what Peter Jones does from Dragon's Den, he's got a really interesting way of actually making sure that his kids don't grow up spoiled, I suppose. And what he does is he goes and says, right, go and work in the public sector, go and work in, the NHS or something like that. And yes, I will double your salary, but actually go and get a good job that can make a difference. And I really like that as a kind of stance, because there's no point in just sitting back on your laurels and hoping for daddy's money to come in. Go and make an actual difference.
100%. And the other thing is, I look, so my wife, wonderful woman, love of my life, came from a completely different background to me. Grew up in Wimbledon, went to Westminster, went to Oxford as a lawyer, tremendously successful. And it's really funny because, if you'd asked 18-year-old me, she kind of would have been the enemy. I'd have been silver spoon, etc. And I realized that in many ways, I was just as bigoted as anyone else. Do you know what I mean? From my kind of some more humble beginnings, I was just as resentful of the people above me. And actually now, again, it sounds a little vulgar, but I'm more and more convinced that the distribution of arseholes in the world is the same at every level of demography.
It's an interesting perception, I suppose. I mean, it really is. I mean, every level will hates the other level, will they not? Because of whatever rebellion that they seem to be affiliated with, I suppose.
So that's it. So I think you just have to, I think the second that you're measuring against who's below or above you, you're screwed. I think you got to figure out the life that you're willing to have. We often joke, we could move to the countryside and probably not work anymore. But that's not the life we want. We want to be in a metropolis. We want to be driven and working on something we care very deeply about. But that means that we're going to be working for the next 50 years.
100%. I mean, but looking at the analogy that you're saying in terms of people above and below you, I mean, it's the same in business, right? In terms of you have competitors, you have people that you're better than, people that you're worse than. At what point is it good just to not care about the competitors because it can somewhat tarnish where you are as an individual in your business journey?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's that whole kind of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation thing. Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly dangerous and either the sort of the arrogance that comes from pulling ahead, or the insecurity that comes and then the sort of trying to copy what they're doing and, launching that product because they launched that product. You really, and it's the same at every level of business. You just need to really narrow the aperture of your focus, have total clarity on the problem you're solving, and really try and shut out the world. And I mean, as much the naysayers and the applause, it's all utterly meaningless and transitory, because next year, if you might be, you might not be the flavor of the month, or you might not be in the lead.
And in terms, I suppose, then of what fundamental success looks like to you, and we know full well that it's not financial, it just can't be. But what does success look like to Daniel?
I think I want to run the mortgage industry.
I thought you were going to say run the country then. I wasn't sure where it was going.
Oh, God, no. No, my background's way too sketchy. No.
Yeah, too much dirt.
Didn't go to Eton. I think I have a crazy idea of how I think home buying should work in the UK. And it's not just about us being, a monopoly in it. It's not that at all. But I think that home ownership, and again, I think it's such an emotional and sort of economically important thing. And if you're on the right side of it, it's great and provides stability and a place for you to build your future. And if you're on the wrong side of it, it's incredibly painful to be like trying to find your way into it. And I think like it's nuts to me even now, but we're kind of in a position maybe where we could fundamentally change it over the next 5 or 10 years. And I guess if we succeed in doing that and we make it easier for people to buy homes, to live sustainably in them, to have the flexibility to access the capital in that home, to do whatever they need to do, like I think I'd be pretty proud of achieving that.
And in terms of changing the market then over the next couple of years, you say 5 to 10 years, if we were to hedge and forecast on what the mortgage world looks like or the home buying world looks like, what is that?
I think there's a few things. I think at the moment it's an incredibly sort of not to use jargon, it's a splintered value chain. So you've got like the estate agent with their set of incentives, the broker with the lender, the conveyancer, the surveyor, and they're all sort of optimizing in their silos and generally being quite unhelpful to each other, which is why it's so painful as a consumer, because you're being sort of handed along this chain of disinterested people, all trying to kind of take their cut. So no, I think the opportunity is in the integration of that chain. And so, you only go through confirming your identity once, and that carries all the way through, and that you can do the searches on whether, there's a protected tree in the back garden right at the beginning rather than right at the end, so you don't have to wait 90 days right at the end of the process. So I think an integrated digital spine for the home buying process that kind of brings all of the stakeholders into a single place and gives them clarity on what's happening and puts the customer experience at the forefront rather than the profit motives of all of the individual service providers. That would be pretty cool. And I think it's not an unrealistic ambition for Habito or for the market.
Well, no, I totally get it. And I mean, I'm glad someone's doing it, frankly, because I'm going through a buy-to-let at the moment and it's a massive ball ache. And in terms of, it's just awful. And in terms of kind of the legal side of things, you mentioned about the searches and the trees in the garden and such, like, how do you do that legal part almost before you go through the purchasing part? Because somebody's time surely is being used up there, or is that all tech?
No, so we're now also a law firm.
Exactly, so I know. Isn't your wife help there, I imagine?
Sadly, it's the wrong kind of lawyer.
Oh, is it?
No. So there's absolutely technology that helps. Although you're at the end of the day, you're still interfacing with local councils and so on. So there are limits. But that's one of the most simple points about it is by, instead of running it serially, by doing some of these things in parallel, you can start to really bring down the overall time. And we found by having a single point of contact for the consumer, all the way from how much can I borrow on the mortgage calculator to completing the transaction, is just a radically different proposition, and that's been by far one of the largest growth areas of our company over the last couple of years.
Do you think you could predict if we're going to be buying houses on the blockchain or indeed through cryptocurrency? Because I know that in Amsterdam they've sold a property recently with Bitcoin. Do you think that's in the future?
I know a bunch of people working on it, and I think, I could absolutely see it. I mean, the funny thing about mortgages is that the quantum of them is just so large, right? Like they'll never be a consumer sort of instrument. So that blockchain is only really going to be relevant to whether this credit fund is selling it to this sovereign wealth fund or this bank is buying it. So it's sort of in that institutional universe where I think the blockchain is interesting, but a little bit less relevant because you haven't got the issue of like diffuse consumer trust. But I imagine just in terms of kind of streamlining the process and reducing the costs involved in buying and selling mortgage securities, it's probably inevitable. Obviously, I want a mortgage doing a buy-to-let. Where can I go? You should immediately go to habito.com.
I should do just that.
Let's stop talking right now. So no, we habito.com. We do deal with buy-to-let as well as normal residential mortgages. And I think and I'm not to do the pitch for Habito. The kind of the cool thing is it's free and we have all the mortgages. So there is absolutely no reason not to go and check it out.
I'm going to do that, Daniel. I've got to shoot off to go and quickly get a mortgage from Habito. Thank you so much for coming on, mate.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. Join me next week, Wednesday at 8 a.m. on all podcast platforms where we'll be speaking to another leading entrepreneur. Show your support by subscribing, as without you, this podcast wouldn't happen. Produced by Pinpoint Media and sponsored by Capsule Cover, this was a Success is in the Mind podcast. Take care.